Hey everyone, Mac is back, and today I want to talk about troop counters, something that's very basic in the game that you typically learn early on, especially in fighting, and I want to try to go into that and discuss it a little bit deeper. So from the very basics of troop countering, you would get this chart that shows you that what counters what when it comes to troops. So for instance, infantry will counter spear, spear counters cav, and cav counters infantry, and bowmen are not countered but don't counter anything as well. So kind of gives you an idea of which troops you need to use once you know someone's formation, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more specifically as well. So I put this little chart together to kind of show which counters you need for specific formations. When you are facing someone, either in a grand castle, or if you're just doing a PvP, you're essentially going to be going after two troop types for the formation, except for PvP, where you're typically going to have all their troops in their castle, so you'd be going against everything. So that's a little bit different. But if you're against grand castles, then this will actually be good, which actually helps, I think, a lot for KVK and other castle siege and that type of thing, where you're typically not going to have. I'm not saying not going to have. I don't say typical, but a lot of times you're only going to have two troop types. You may try to mix it in, but unless you're a whale, you're really not going to have all three troop types very, very strong. So it's going to be difficult for you to fend attacks off when they if you try to go with all three troop types. So I've broken down all 6 of the formations where you can change the front and back line, and I'm just going to go over each real very briefly here with a little bit more information about them and why these are the counters. Also, what else you can do also. So for instance, the very first one here is the infantry cav formation. So the infantry is that front line, so the counter to that, according to that chart, is cavalry. And so you want this, if you see this formation, your counter to attack that's going to be cavalry. And the thing is, this cavalry is going to be your only formation, so their infantry are going to be countered, so they won't do as much damage to the cavalry. And these cavalry would be in line with your cavalry. But if you have cavalry very strong, then you should be able to punch this first line here and do some really, really good damage in this case. There really isn't in this you're not going to add another. Typically, you're not going to add another troop type to this attack. It's not. I mean, you could add make a cavalry spearman. The problem that you have is you're limiting the number of cavalry that you're going to be attacking this front line, and the front line is what you really want to counter. And especially if you put spear in the back, the spear aren't going to do as much damage, so it'll take longer to get to that front line. So the counter to this is definitely going to be cavalry. Like I said, unless you have, maybe you're facing someone who's a lot weaker than you, then then you could possibly maybe put 20% of your troop march in there as spearmen, so that when you do get through the infantry, you'll go right into the spearmen, or go into the cavalry. Now, the reason that I say that you want to have cavalry, pure cavalry here, is because a lot of times you're not going to be able to even get to that cavalry back line. I mean, if they have a very, very strong infantry front line, you may just get through them before the battle even ends. So you may not be able to use those spearmen, and they're basically going to be a waste because they're not going to do as much damage to these to this infantry. And then the same goes for the next 2 formations, because the infantry again is going to counter those spears, and the spear here are going to counter those calves, and then the back lines here are going to be even on both sides of those. So it's the exact same concept. So I just explained this one, and these two are exactly the same. Now, when we get to difficult situation. So so now someone has an infantry spear formation and you want to counter that. Well, typically you would think that, why don't I just go pure spear, or I'm sorry, pure infantry against this? And that's not a bad tactic. It's not the best tactic though to do. And the reason is if you're using a pure infantry, then you're still going infantry against this front line. So you're basically even. If your stats were even with them, if they were dead even, then then you're going to be holding off, depending on how many infantry they have up front there, you're going to be holding them off for a decent amount of time, and you're not going to be able to do, you won't be able to do as much damage because you're not going to be able to get to that spear with those infantry to be able to do that damage that you need. So as you can see over here, the proper or the best counter formation for that is the infantry cavalry. And the reason for that is you're going to have your infantry is going to go against their infantry, and then their spear is going to go against your frontline infantry, which your infantry counter that spear, but then your cav is going to go against their frontline infantry, and that's where the damage is going to be dealt. So you need enough infantry up front here to be able to hold off their infantry, and it'll be countering their spear, and then their cavalry is going to, that's where you're going to be doing the massive amount of damage. So and then if those cavalry are fortunate enough to get through that infantry front line, then your infantry is still up front, and that's where they'll just annihilate those spear, in the second line as well. So and the same goes for these next two formations. The same thing, the spear, or even with their spear, and then this infantry is going to be countering their infantry or their spear in the front as well. Same down here, same concept as well. So as you can see, there's a little more to it. And again, for these other two down here, you could go pure spear into this one. You could go pure cav into this one. So that's just kind of how it is. Now, when you're attacking a castle, it's a little bit different because, well, I say a little bit different. It's still basically the same type of concept, I guess. But for instance, like if you go up here, they're going to have an infantry spear formation, but the cavalry will be the next one. So depending on what the cavalry do or how many cavalry they have, because that cavalry is going to get up there and it's going to start eating away at your infantry front line. So that's why it's much more difficult if you're both in your army gear to solo a castle, because if you are not much strong, if you're not extreme, much stronger than them, then you're going to have an issue because they're going to be able to count whatever formation. It won't matter what formation you put at them, as long as they have some type of troop types, of all troop types. So and then eventually the spearmen, or not the spearmen, the bowmen will get in there as well, and when they do, they do the most damage. So they take time, of course, to get into formation and shoot, but yeah, it's going to be much more difficult for a PvP. Soloing a castle like in PvP. And just something that I wanted to show in like the battle reports. So for instance, if you scroll down to the bottom of your battle reports, you'll have these three different little, I guess, blurbs right here that show the cavalry versus infantry, infantry spear, spear versus cavalry. So these are all the counters. You can see the counters here as well. And if you just hover over it, it says that the cavalry versus infantry counter is a ratio of 200%. So basically the cavalry, if you have cavalry going against their infantry, it does 200% more damage. So it's double. So we weren't sure exactly what that was before these battle reports came out, but now we know that it is 200%. There was a thought that it was 4 times that amount, or 33 and 3/3%. 333% more too as well, but now we know that it's 200%. So each one of these does double the amount of damage. So that's why it's very important to try to counter as best you can, because if you can, you're going to do so much more damage, even if they are very powerful. If you're facing an infantry that has a high health and high defense, and you throw cavalry in there that aren't as strong as their infantry, you're still going to do a massive amount of damage because they do 200% more, but they also are able to resist damage too. They increase their I guess their be their health and defense of them as well. So it's actually a lot different, a lot better if you have the counter, and that's what basically what I'm trying to stress out of this. So that's basically what I wanted to go over was the counters here. As you can see, I brought this chart back up again. So make sure that you go after just two troop types. Buff that front line with your defense and health, and throw some attack in there as well. That never hurts. And then just buff the attack of that second line, just to to be able to do as much damage as you possibly can. So here, just leave this chart up here for a few more seconds. You can take a look at it, take a screenshot or whatever you want to do. But just something to try to help you when you do scout a castle, and you're able to find out maybe what their formation is, either by looking at their wall and seeing what commanders they have, maybe check their equipment that they have on their lord, and see if most of it's geared towards like an infantry or a spear or a cavalry, and then just try to use that information for a counter. And then also after you're done attacking them, scout their castle again, see what troops they have left in there, because after you've attacked them with an infantry cavalry formation against what they had, an infantry spear. Well, if they don't have any infantry left in there, that infantry spear formation becomes a spear cav formation. So if that's the case, then you look down here and there's your spear cav. So now you want to switch this up to an infantry a spearman infantry formation. So you want to be able to do that on the kind of on the fly as fast as you can. I know sometimes it can be difficult because battles are fast and they're fought very quickly. And you may just go infantry cav into that again, but if you do that, you might have a harder time getting through it, because if you're attacking infantry cav into a spear cavalry, it's not terrible because your infantry front line is countering their spear, but that cavalry is going to be running into your infantry as well, so it's a double counter. So just something to consider. So until next time, Mac out.